I have that thing, absolute pitch, which people haven't heard of, and they ask if I mean perfect pitch, and I'm like, well, that's a worse name for it, but sure. It's apparently a rare thing among the humans, arguably around 1 in 1,000, but I contest its alleged rarity. I think both that it's not that rare, and that we can make it less rare because we can access that subconscious skill in more people. I speak from a perspective of having this skill and not understanding how other people could not. How can people have experiences different from me, the main character? But I think there's a lot of evidence of experienced musicians and those who learned a tonal language at a young age having absolute pitch. And there might be loads of non-musicians who can technically do it if they just learn the vocabulary. It's drastically understudied. That's why I was going to make it my dissertation project at university, which is when you turn your waste of time pretending to learn stuff into a waste of time pretending to discover stuff. Or I pretended I was, as if I really believed that I could put up with a 4th year of an absolute rip-off of an experience. It'd make more sense to withdraw after 3 years with a worthless degree certificate anyway, and then make a video essay a decade later, by my own standards. That way I don't have to do shit like academic citation. I can just say stuff, and you can trust me. I said that. Trust me. Absolute pitch is the oral ability. Let's just change how we say the word oral. Is the aural ability to perceive and define pitch without a reference point. So hearing a note or a song, I can immediately identify what the note or key is. It doesn't feel remarkable to me. It may as well be just recognizing a color. I think of color as a good comparison because there's a scientifically definitive spectrum from the infinitesimal to the infinite, and a range of those that a human can actually perceive somewhere toward the bottom end of infinitesimal to infinite, which we've given different names and demarcations across different cultures. In both cases, there can be an element of relativity in how we perceive them, so with a skewed initial reference point, on odd occasions we might misunderstand the neighbouring tones. That's why I'm dressed in white and gold today. It's kind of a party trick that someone could hit or sing a random note and I could identify it, and then wonder what the hell I'm doing at a party. Or a chord, or a discord, that's the one that's actually worthwhile. I'm not gonna demonstrate this in this video because, well, I'm doing this alone. It would be impossible to prove when I film and edit this. And the whole perception is really unremarkable to me, to the extent that it's not fun to show it off. Find me in person and I'll identify notes for maybe 30 seconds. If you show me your apparently impressive skill in return. Or love. Show me love. Musicians who don't have absolute pitch love to ask for a demonstration. They see it like magic. They covet it. I mean, it's been a while since I met people, but university music people were like that. From my perspective, though, I just don't get how they don't have this perception. I can't fathom knowing what the notes are, but failing to recognize them. You can see a color, you can hear a pitch. Maybe non-musicians don't know exactly which pitches there are, or which pitch is which pitch, but once you're past that, I don't see the hitch to the sitch that makes it so niche. It's not like a pitch can switch. Because pitches are scientifically definitive. I mean, it took developing a consensus to make them definitive, and that definition has technically mutated over time, the great pitch shift. And I'm speaking about music in the 12-note European tradition. The skill isn't a result of the vocabulary, but pitches come from vibration frequencies, and we've given those names. It's complicated by things like Doppler, but the perceptor is still perceiving a particular, specific frequency, so why can't they recognize it? That's why I suggest they can, though the evidence is kind of stacked against me on this one. Or more, the lack of evidence is stacked against me. If you hear 440 Hz sine wave 440 oscillations per second, then you're hearing a perfect A4, also known as sheet music. There's only micro variation to how this pure tone is going to sound in different circumstances, and since those will literally change the frequency that's being perceived, they invalidate the question. So if you'd heard A4 before, maybe you'd recognize it. Remember this. Yeah. I look like a faker. Because you can hear and recognize familiar music, and I'd posit that you'd also distinguish when it's played back at a wrong pitch. And not just because of vocal and percussion timbre when it's digitally pitch shifted, not just because it sounds mechanically wrong, but sensorially wrong, like it's in a different hue. I would define these transpositions of notes without changing their relative relationship as literally changing their audio character. Not character as a subjective thing, but something from how close it is to the lower end or the top end. Lower voices are perceived as having more somber tones. And I'm suggesting that's not just from tone meaning a somber timbre, but also from tone meaning pitch. If you digitally slow down a track, it sounds doomy in both pace and pitch. Am I saying that's an objective doom? Maybe. Genres of metal have increasingly despondent names based around what note they've dropped the bass string to. Here's something you might don't know. British copies and broadcasts of American media have generally played back at a different frame rate due to differing TV standards. Since it retains the original number of frames, it actually plays back at a different speed and a different pitch. This means my entire damn community collection is technically a bit chipmunked, a bit hurried. I'll particularly notice in music where voices sound a little too helium, or, if I already know the music from not on a DVD. Feels unacceptable, but that's how it worked for an entire generation of media. Worthless, imperfect media. Well, at least the blackface episode is still on. Maybe I just retain audio memory better. There's often songs in my head, and they'll be at the right pitch if I actually know how they go. So I've got the pitch reference points defined mentally, and surely that's all you need. This means I can generally perform a song from memory if I know it as a listener. Probably a reduced version given my skill level, referring to chordal songs that translate to the hacky way I play piano or guitar. And I'm not necessarily nailing every layer of the sound, but that's down to my dexterity and number of arms, rather than not having it in the databanks. If it's something I don't really know, it'll involve a bit of guesswork from musical fluency, familiarity with shapes. I've noticed when people break into song, it's more likely than not that they're within a whole tone of the source pitch. Because of some muscle memory, because human voices have a specific pitch spectrum. I think people who allegedly don't have absolute pitch significantly beat the odds in their subconscious instincts. I think I've even got a citation from that because I read the Wikipedia. Music theorists used to suggest that each key has a distinct character. You've seen those funny tables about it. And this is more credible than it seems. Well, definitely before equal temperament tuning, because there were slightly different gaps between the pitches, so it's very believable that they feel different. Maybe D minor is the saddest key. To me, they still kind of feel different anyway, if maybe only because of their instrumentation. White note keys are far more common, so things in black note keys feel kind of aloof and obscure in a real cool way. Note that in modern tuning, there's no scientific basis for claiming that black notes and their scales have a different relative character, because we now have a uniformly exponential frequency interval between notes. In historic tunings, this was different, to the extent that C sharp and D flat were distinct notes, so the scales that the instrument wasn't tuned for were gonna sound weirder. It's also different across other cultures, as are the note names. So rock guitar skews to E minor, alt rock to E flat minor. Acoustic guitar can trend towards C or A or G or D, but then there's less going on in the bass, so D does have a different sound. And the rest can be recognized by the standard tuning in versions of their triads. Many orchestral instruments run in specific tunings that bind their timbre to particular keys. Human voices, especially mine, have limits on their pitch range, so a male rock singer might peter out around the high G, unless they're actually talented. If higher notes are going to be in some kind of head voice, something I don't have a grasp of, then notes in a distinct range will have a distinct feel. Not absolutely uniform among performers, but still roughly consistent enough to observe and trace. All of these attributes of instruments are going to contribute to which keys are used in composition, unless we impose a policy of reassigning keys at random. Should we do that? Let me know in the comments. So I just thought a standard tuning guitarist should be able to roughly recognize the sound of the unfingered strings. Let's just say the lowest one. You know when that sounds right? And from that, they've got a reference point where any note can be identified by relative pitch. Note that this is literally not how it works, it just seems that way to me. I wonder if I'm overestimating others' audio imagination. Can you summon up a song in your head and kind of hear it? I don't know, I'm not you. And yeah, your voice, it comes and goes with different days and common colds, but you might have an idea of where the bottom note of your vocal range is, in which case you've got a pitch reference point. You can relative it from there. Or just use the first note of a song you're always singing, you'll probably get it right. It'll feel right. You'll feel your throat vibrating a certain number of times per second, and you'll know. So relative pitch is the relative skill of those who can't perceive absolute pitch. If they're fed a reference point given a pitch and its name, they can define other pitches by their intervals. It takes a bit of musical training, like I think absolute pitch does, but apparently it takes more than that. I think my relative pitch instinct is actually a bit slower than an average trained musician, because I'm hearing their absolute pitches and then backforming them to mathematical relativity. Having a direct understanding of notes by actual pitch means I'm much less driven to define them by the relationships between them. If asked to recite a melody from memory, I'm gonna get it in the right key, despite the limitations of my voice. I would struggle a bit to recite a song in the wrong key because I'd have to transcribe every note kind of one by one. The skill of relative pitch comes from recognizing the texture of each interval, some of which cross up very pleasantly, like an octave, and some that sound kinda nasty, like a diminished fifth. I know the character of a diminished fifth, but I also know the character of C and G flat, and that is more salient to me. What's actually scientifically going on when we hear intervals and decide whether they're harmonic or ugly is pretty interesting, but isn't for this video, and I've not yet quite lowered myself to being a musicology YouTuber. Unless I'm doing that right here. Please subscribe? Let's just say it's as much about complementary frequencies as it is about neighboring ones. I might drop the colors part here because the color spectrum only goes from red to violet once. Pitches are defined cyclically, so these most complementary frequencies are kind of just given the same name across the octaves. Every C is a different note scientifically, but its frequency is a perfect multiple of all the lower Cs, and that's what makes it a C. We distinguish octaves by numbers, with the middle C of a typical piano being C4. In my experience, it's much more difficult to use absolute pitch to recognize an octave than a note. Because, if you play C4 on another instrument, it's still obviously a C, to me. But which octave it's on involves the feel of that instrument, and defining these relative octaves feels far less musically relevant than the timbre. That bit I can prove the science on, but yeah, that's musicology. It's how you can say that two instruments playing literally the exact same note, or two voices, have different qualities of depth or treble. Same pitch, different depth. That's timbre. Very high pitches, like when you can hear a kind of buzz in the room or inside your head, my aptitude to define those is diminished.
Like a fifth.
The same could be said of low sounds, but I mean those that are so low that we perceive them as a rumble rather than a pitch, where the oscillations per second are almost countable. If I pause and concentrate, I might be able to figure out which pitch a very high sound is, maybe by thinking of the pitches a few octaves down from it, but that doesn't even feel relevant to my instincts of music. The very principle of notes becomes absurd at that extent. They're musically useless, and the science backs that up. The sheer spread of hertz, and tinnitus does hurt, makes it unlikely for an extremely high pitch to be complementary to any music. The precisions of tuning just lose their relevance there. So yeah, you might catch me out if you tap the 690th note on a piano. The extreme keys of pianos are even usually a bit out of key, and even digital pianos tend to stay loyal to this. The very furthest two octaves on a typical 88 key are kind of just there for expressions of extremity rather than pitched music function. Another weakness to my absolute pitch is a margin of error somewhere around half a semitone. Like, find something that's not tuned to our general standards of pitch, and of course I'm going to struggle to name it because it's incompatible. That can be a bit of a head blag. And this might slide past the halfway point into me getting something one note out. I'd say this comes from growing up with a janky piano we never bothered to get tuned, which conveniently remained one semitone flat on every damn key, an alt-rock piano. Oh, a semitone is an entire note interval. I wish it wasn't called semi, because the only thing it's half of is its double. This semitone weakness also comes in when perceiving the kind of music I'm into, which often has guitars and blokes who realize that guitars sound cool and alternative and better for bloke voices if they drop everything by one fret. So now the general guitar notes and chords are one semitone down, so they retain the whole shape and character and function of their standard tuning counterparts, but are lower like that. The cooler the music you like, the lower the bottom note on the guitar. That's why folk music uses a capo. If you want to know the disadvantages of absolute pitch, other than a slower reflex for relative pitch, well, that's about all. Maybe we're more sensitive to things being out of tune, but considering some of the guitar music I've published, maybe not. I think maybe absolute pitch has made me more self-conscious and self-limiting of the upper extent of my voice. I really can't go very high at all, and a lot of men can achieve much higher. And that's probably a technique I can learn. I tried going to a vocal tutor and they couldn't figure me out, so...
I think I'd also struggle playing a transposed instrument, because the note name is literally not the sound that comes out. It wouldn't be literally more difficult to play, but there's just a false grammar with the names of the notes.
Apparently pitch perception can change throughout life if you live for years and years. My hearing is still hella good, despite tinnitus that's not from hearing damage. But I watched a tedious musicology YouTuber once who claimed that people's perception of pitch drops throughout life, and it's people with absolute pitch who are cognizant of it, which can frustrate their instincts and maybe lose the skill, which would be an absolute bitch. Maybe that's why older people have deeper voices. It's not. That YouTuber said that that's why he's glad he doesn't have absolute pitch. Yeah, Fox, you're real glad you didn't get those grapes. It's generally a convenient little superpower, only relevant within music, but music's all that's relevant to me. And yeah, I have plenty of defects to balance it out. Ooh, I've just learned on the Wikipedia page, and yeah, that's the extent of research I do for these videos, that apparently it's much rarer to be able to sing a note on demand than just to recognize it. I, again, doubt, but I guess I don't know what it's like to be shit at singing. I recognize that vocal skill, oral skill if you must, is distinct from aural perception. But in my experience, vocal ability involves a lot of perception. If someone with absolute pitch can't sing a note on demand, couldn't they just attempt it and get it wrong, but know exactly how they're wrong and then adjust it? I do not know, I'll leave that to someone less talented. Oh, apparently gerbils have absolute pitch. I love discovering new things I have in common with gerbils. You know, catching up on Wikipedia is just confirming exactly what my thesis was going to be, so that's convenient. I could have just cribbed off that. Yeah, I could have been the leading researcher on this because of how little people bother researching it. But that would involve staying in academia and living a well-funded, socially enriched, city-dwelling life of being really boring about really interesting stuff. I'm basically saying that my superpower ain't all that super because all logic suggests it's accessible to anyone with hearing. But that doesn't change it. Maybe you gotta access pitch education real early to get this, and maybe get lucky with genetics. My childhood was middle C enough to have piano lessons, and now UK music education is kind of being completely destroyed, but also we got the internet, and I think spreading understanding of how absolute pitch works might contribute toward making it a more accessible skill if enough 4-year-olds watch my videos, which they sure seem to. Maybe we can demystify it. Of course, distributing access to absolute pitch would invalidate one of the few things that makes me so exceptional and exotic, so I'm doing this out of an instinct of pure self-destruction. Like most things. And on that note,